She told me I was too embarrassing to attend her wedding. Then she turned around and demanded my $2.6 million estate, as if I owed her everything. But while she was chasing money, I found something else. A sealed letter from my late wife, hidden inside a wooden box. And the truth written there, it wasn't love. It was a weapon, waiting to destroy. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in my living room, staring at the framed photos that once brought me pride. Now they pierced me like sharp needles. My daughter's face, smiling at her high school graduation, her arm around me, my wife standing tall beside us. Back then, I believed everything I sacrificed was worth it. I believed she would carry those memories with gratitude. But now, after the way she spat those words at me, calling me peasant stock after banning me from her own wedding, all I could see was betrayal. And it wasn't just the words. It was the coldness behind them. It was as if every dollar I spent, every hour I worked, every piece of myself I gave had vanished into thin air. I remember the numbers. They play in my mind like a cruel ledger. $50,000 for her private school tuition, because I didn't want her to grow up in the rough public schools I had known as a boy. $25,000 for that shiny BMW on her 17th birthday. She cried with joy, hugged me so tight and whispered, "Dad, I'll never forget this." But she did. When she turned 23, she maxed out her credit cards chasing designer clothes and weekend trips, $40,000 of debt, and I paid it off in one painful lump sum. I told myself, she's young, she'll learn. I let it go. I even drained part of my retirement savings to cover those bills. I thought I was investing in her future. I thought love meant never saying no. I gave up so much more than money. I turned down a dream trip to Alaska, which I had planned with my wife, because Emily needed help with a down payment on her condo. I spent nights eating beans and rice while the restaurant bills kept climbing, just so she could have everything I didn't. And now, what do I have to show for it? Nothing but silence and shame. My sacrifices became her entitlement. My love became her weapon. I turned my eyes toward the window, where the Atlantic waves rolled in and broke against the rocks. The house itself was a monument to my life's work. This beach house wasn't just worth $6 million. It was my dream of retirement, built brick by brick, paid for with every back-breaking shift, every double hour I worked at the diner before I had my own restaurants. My late wife and I poured ourselves into this place. We painted the walls, picked out the cedar shingles, and planted hydrangeas by the porch. I could still see her in the kitchen, humming while she baked pies, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. I could still hear the echo of our granddaughter's laughter chasing seagulls in the yard. This house was not just an asset. It was our story. And now, Emily wanted it like it was just another line item in her portfolio, something she could cash in to clean up her and Will's mess. She didn't see the birthdays we celebrated here, the Christmas mornings with stockings by the fire, or the anniversary dinners we shared on the deck while the sun melted into the sea. She only saw dollar signs. She wanted to erase the meaning of this house, to strip it of memory and turn it into cold cash. That was what broke me. She wasn't just after a house. She was after my soul. The afternoon light dimmed, and I forced myself to stand. I had avoided the closet in our bedroom for months, because every time I opened it, I could smell her perfume still clinging to her clothes. But something drew me in that day. Maybe it was grief, maybe anger, maybe both. I pulled down a stack of old boxes. My hands trembled as I reached for one small wooden box, the kind we once bought at a flea market. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside, wrapped in a faded silk scarf, was a sealed envelope. My heart skipped. My wife's handwriting stared back at me. For John, when the time comes. My chest tightened. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find, but knowing I had to know. The letter was long, written in her careful script. As I read, my world shifted. She revealed that years ago, when Will's family first courted Emily, they pressured her into signing agreements. They wanted to ensure that if anything happened to me, assets tied to our businesses could be redirected to them. She never told me, afraid it would cause a rift. She wrote, "I couldn't bear to see you fight them, John. I thought keeping the peace was better for Emily's future. But now I fear what they'll do. If you're reading this, you must protect what we built." The words crushed me. My wife had carried this burden alone, hiding it even on her deathbed. And suddenly, the betrayal wasn't just Emily's. It was bigger. It was a web of manipulation stretching back years. My grief doubled, no tripled. I lost her once to death, and now again to secrets. Yet at the same time, in her letter, I found a weapon. Proof, a warning, a path. I dropped the letter on my lap and whispered into the air, "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked, but as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, but underneath it a spark flickered. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about a house. This was about our legacy, mine and hers. It was about refusing to let Emily and Will and the Harringtons rewrite the story we had bled for. I realized I had been blind. I had mistaken indulgence for love, thinking that if I kept giving, she would finally see my worth. But I had been feeding a fire that only burned brighter, a greed that consumed everything. I sat there repeating the words in my mind. Enough, enough. The truth in that letter wasn't just a wound. It was a weapon, a gift from my wife. Not her last kiss, not her last hug, but her last act of love, to arm me for this very battle. My tears dried, my hands steadied. For the first time in weeks, I felt power. I picked up my phone. Dozens of unread messages blinked on the screen. Emily's desperate words filled the notifications. "Dad, please call me. Dad, you don't understand. Dad, this is for the best." I stared at them. My thumb hovered. And then, slowly, I deleted them all, one by one. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I switched off the phone, placed it face down on the table, and felt the silence wash over me. It was a small act, but to me, it was monumental. It was the first time in years I had chosen my peace over her chaos. I stood, walked to the framed photo of my wife, and touched the glass. "I won't let them take what's ours," I whispered. "I promise you." And in that moment I believed it. My wife was gone, but she had left me a roadmap. The pain had become clear. The grief had turned into resolve. I felt my back straighten, my breath deepen. I was no longer the beaten-down father. I was a man with a mission. The room itself seemed to change with me. The walls, once comforting, now felt like sentinels. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner no longer soothed me. It sounded like a countdown. Each tick reminded me that time was short, that Emily and Will were circling, ready to strike. The couch where Emily once curled up with hot cocoa now looked foreign, as if a stranger had sat there. The laughter that used to fill this place had evaporated, replaced by a heavy silence. Even my favorite chair, the one I read the paper in every morning, now pressed down on me with its emptiness. The house reflected my loneliness, my betrayal. But as I sat there, I realized it also reflected something else. It reflected the battlefield I was about to step onto. This was no longer just my home. It was the fortress I had to defend. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the window again. The waves outside slammed against the shore, relentless. I thought about my granddaughter Amanda, innocent, untouched by this greed. She had always hugged me tighter than anyone. She had once told me, "Grandpa, I don't care about presents. I just like when you tell me stories." Maybe, I thought, she would be the one who understood someday. Maybe she would be the heir not of my wealth, but of my values. Or maybe it would be someone else, one of my loyal employees at the restaurant, or even the neighbor who always brought me soup after my wife died. The truth hit me hard. Family is not always blood. Family is those who stand by you when storms rage. That thought steadied me. I closed the curtains, held the letter once more, and pressed it to my chest. "You gave me the truth," I said softly. "And now, I'll use it." I placed the wooden box on the desk, knowing it would never leave my sight again. My mind raced with possibilities, lawyers, documents, conversations yet to come. The Harringtons thought they had cornered me. Emily thought she could shame me, rob me, and walk away untouched. But they didn't know about this letter. They didn't know the truth that would unravel everything. I sat down in my chair, straightened my shoulders, and felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what they would do next. Because now, I held the one thing they couldn't buy, bully or bury. I held the truth, and with it, their world was about to fall apart. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after I discovered my wife's letter, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't the helpless kind of weight that drags you down into despair. It was the kind of weight that settles when you finally decide to carry something with purpose. I had carried guilt, shame, and grief for too long. Now I was carrying resolve. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake when I made coffee. My steps down the hall were steady. Even the sound of the waves outside the window felt different, less like a taunt and more like a rhythm I could walk to. I knew what I had to do. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from my attorney, Richard Collins. His office smelled faintly of leather and old books, the kind of place where decisions are carved into stone. He studied me carefully as I laid the letter on his desk. I watched his brow tighten as he read my wife's words. He looked up slowly, his eyes serious. "John, this changes everything," he said. His tone wasn't just professional, it carried a weight of respect, almost admiration. He pulled out his file, flipped through documents, and then handed me a pen. "The first step is to freeze every asset tied to your name. We can't give them even a sliver of an opening. Are you ready?" My hand hovered over the paper. Just a week ago, I wouldn't have been. I would have hesitated, worried what Emily might think, hoping she'd come around. But now, there was no hesitation. I pressed the pen down, my signature flowed, clean and strong. I could feel the ink digging into the fibers of the page, almost like carving a mark in stone. My fingers didn't tremble. My voice didn't falter when I said, "Do it. Lock it all down." Richard nodded and began making calls. For the first time in a long time, I felt control seep back into me. Later that afternoon, I walked into my bank. The cool air smelled faintly of antiseptic and polished marble. I was there to make sure everything Richard filed had taken effect. A young teller, no older than my granddaughter, recognized my name on the slip. She looked at me with wide eyes, then leaned closer and whispered, "Mr. Miller, are you all right? You look tired. Are you holding up okay?" Her voice had a softness, a human warmth, that cut through me. That tiny shred of kindness from a stranger felt sharper than Emily's betrayal. My own daughter had spoken to me like I was a burden, but here was a girl I didn't know, asking if I was all right. I smiled faintly, swallowed hard, and said, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Thank you for asking." She didn't know it, but her words cemented something inside me. I deserved better than to be treated like an embarrassment by my own blood. That night, I sat in my chair as the grandfather clock ticked behind me. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of strategy. I knew Emily and Will would come. They always did, once their patience ran thin. And I was ready. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would sit, how I would let them talk themselves into the hole they were digging. They thought I was still weak, broken, still desperate for their approval. But they had no idea. The next day, they showed up. Emily wore her designer coat, the one I had bought for her last Christmas. Will carried a sleek leather folder, his chest puffed up with that Harrington arrogance I had come to despise. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, like vultures circling a carcass. Emily started first, her voice sweet as syrup but with a bite underneath. "Dad, we've been thinking about what's best for everyone. The house in Cape Cod. It's too much for you to handle alone. You'd be better off in a smaller place, somewhere near a care facility. We can take care of the sale, and you can relax." Will slid the folder across the table. "All you need to do is sign here. We've prepared everything. It's just paperwork." His grin spread wide, smug. I didn't touch the folder. I didn't even look at it. Instead, I leaned back, folded my arms, and listened. My silence made them fidget, but also emboldened them. They mistook my quiet for weakness. Emily's cheeks flushed as she pushed harder. "Dad, you've always said family comes first. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. This is for your own good." I let them talk. I let them reveal themselves. Every word, every smirk, every hint of entitlement was a nail in their coffin. Then Will, in his arrogance, let something slip. He chuckled and said, "You should be grateful, John. We even gave your seat at the wedding to someone important, a real investor. That was worth more than your presence anyway." The words hit me like a slap. my seat, my place as a father, sold off like a bargaining chip. My face burned, not from shame this time, but from fury. They had not only erased me from Emily's life, but they had auctioned me off for their own gain. The humiliation doubled, no tripled. My daughter's wedding was not just a celebration without me. It was a transaction. My silence thickened. I could feel my heart pounding, but my voice stayed calm. "Is that so?" I said softly. Will grinned, thinking he had scored a point. Emily shifted uncomfortably, realizing too late what he had revealed. The irony of it all was sharpened by what happened next. A week earlier, that banker's assistant had looked me in the eye and told me, "We're proud to serve someone like you." The contrast tore at me. A stranger valued me more than my own flesh and blood. That contrast became my anchor. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer craved their love. I looked at the folder on the table, finally opening it. Inside was a contract, neatly prepared, transferring the deed of my house to their names temporarily. It was bold. It was brazen. It was theft in daylight. My wife's letter pulsed in my pocket. I didn't sign. Instead, I slid the folder back and said nothing. I saw a panic flash in Emily's eyes. Will tried to cover it with bluster. "You don't have to think about it, John. Just sign. It's just a formality." I smiled faintly. "You've already decided everything for me. Why rush?" His jaw tightened. Emily reached out, trying to touch my hand. "Dad, please. We're family. This is what Mom would have wanted." That was their weapon, using her name, dragging her memory into their scheme. My heart twisted, but instead of breaking, it hardened. "You think you know what your mother wanted?" I whispered. She left me her words. "Not you, not him, me." I didn't explain further. Let them stew in their ignorance. That night I met Richard again. He had something new for me. He tapped his computer, pulled up a public record, and turned the screen toward me. "You're going to want to see this." My stomach dropped. There it was. Will Harrington, the great businessman, carried nearly $900,000 in hidden debt, wrapped up in failed ventures and shell companies. He had been masking it under the Harrington family name. My wife's fears had been justified. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. Desperation is dangerous, but it's also sloppy. I leaned back, exhaling slowly, the weight of it all pressed down, then lifted. "So that's it," I said. "That's the truth they're so desperate to hide." Richard nodded, sliding a printed copy of the records into my folder. "This is your ace, John. When the time comes, this will tear them apart." I picked up the papers, held them firmly in my hands, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. It wasn't joy, it was certainty. I had the weapon. I thought back to Emily's words, to Will's smirk, to the sting of being replaced at my own daughter's wedding. They thought I had lost. They thought I had no fight left in me. They thought I was a broken old man, too tired to push back. But they were wrong. I looked straight ahead, into the invisible lens of time, and said the words out loud, steady and clear. "They think I've lost, but the game has only just begun. And to you, watching, I'll say this. If you understand what it feels like to be underestimated, to be pushed aside, to be treated like nothing after giving everything, then type one word for me in the comments. Type justice, because that's what this is all about." I left Richard's office with a thick file under my arm, the documents crisp, the truth burning inside me like a torch. Outside, the evening sky bled orange into purple. The air felt sharp, alive. My feet were steady, my back straight. I wasn't walking like a defeated man anymore. I was walking like someone headed toward a battlefield, already holding the winning weapon. They didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. I chose a Sunday afternoon because I wanted the light. In my house, the late sun slides across the living room like a patient hand, touching the photos, the mantel, the old clock, and then resting on the wide oak table I bought the year Emily was born. I wanted that light on the table when they sat down. I wanted them to see what they were trying to take. I brewed coffee, set out water, and straightened the chairs. I didn't fuss. I moved slowly, quietly, the way you do when you've already made up your mind. When the doorbell rang, I didn't jump. I breathed in, breathed out, and opened the door. Emily walked in first, eyes doing their usual sweep, judging, measuring. Will followed, jaw set, a leather folio tucked under his arm like a trophy. Two of my cousins came, both invited as witnesses, both looking at me with the kind of worry people wear when they don't know which side is about to break. Richard arrived last. He stepped in with a nod, a steadying presence. His briefcase clicked open and stayed open on the end table. The room felt smaller than usual, not because of the people, but because of what we all brought with us. History, expectations, fear, and me, with something else tucked in my pocket. Truth. I asked everyone to sit. I made a point of taking the chair with my back to the window so the light would be on their faces. I don't know if they noticed, but I did. It mattered to me. It said I wasn't hiding. Will placed his folder in front of him and couldn't help the little smile that crept up. He was already counting the win in his head. Emily crossed her legs, that expensive coat sliding off her shoulder like it belonged in a magazine. She didn't take it off. She never truly arrived anywhere. She hovered. She waited for the room to bend toward her. Not today. I folded my hands on the table. "Thank you for coming," I said. My voice sounded different even to me. Clear, no gravel, no wobble. I let the quiet sit. I've learned that quiet is a kind of hammer. People rush to fill it. People confess themselves to it. Will cleared his throat first, of course. "John," he said, "we appreciate you hosting. We've brought a simple plan to take some pressure off of you. We know this house is a lot. We can handle the sale, move you somewhere more to manageable. You'll have everything you need." Emily jumped in. "Dad, it's safer for you. We can make sure you're near good care. You won't have to worry." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The smile was for the cousins and for Richard, to make her sound reasonable. I nodded as if considering a menu. Will slid the folder across the table with 2 fingers. The paper whispered against the wood. "Take a look," he said. "All the paperwork is prepared. No surprises. Sign there, and we'll do the rest." He tapped 3 blue flags like he was teaching a child. I didn't touch it. I let my eyes move from the folder to his face, then to Emily's. "Before we get to your plan," I said, "I'd like to talk about signatures." Something flickered between them. It was quick. A blink. A twitch. I had trained myself to see these little storms. I slid a thin document from Richard's briefcase. It was a printed copy of a digital trace. The notary log. The metadata. Dry stuff, unless you understand what it can prove. Richard rested his fingertips on the table, close enough to anchor me, far enough not to speak for me. "This," I said, "shows a signature placed on an authorization last week. It looks like mine. It isn't. It was submitted from a device registered to Will Harrington." I kept my voice steady. "That is a crime." Will barked a laugh that tried too hard. "That's ridiculous," he said. "There must be some mistake. Anyone could have—" Emily cut in. "Dad, if there was a mix-up, it wasn't meant to hurt you. You take a long time to decide things. We were just trying to help move things along." The cousins shifted. They weren't expecting that. The room got smaller. The clock ticked. I let the silence do its work. Will reached for the folder as if movement could fix things. "Look," he said, forcing a grin. "I spoke with Richard already to understand your options." Richard's chair creaked as he sat up. "You came to my office without Mr. Miller's permission," he said, voice as even as stone. "You asked me to prepare a transfer. You told me Mr. Miller had agreed. He had not." Emily's mouth opened and closed. Anger rose in her cheeks. "We were trying to protect the family," she said. "Dad can't handle this house. He can't handle these decisions." She turned to my cousins as if the jury sat there. "He forgets things. He gets overwhelmed. I'm his daughter. I'm responsible." My hand stayed folded. I looked at her and thought of the night I sat on the kitchen floor with her at 2 a.m. because she had a fever and was afraid to sleep. I thought of the first time she drove that BMW, how she cried because I trusted her. I thought of the way she had looked at me at the rehearsal dinner last month, the words she had used, the way she had enjoyed them. Peasant stock. I let those memories sit beside me like old friends who had earned their place. Then I spoke. "I'm handling this just fine," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. And I will handle it to the end. Emily looked away. Will's smile congealed. He flipped open his folder anyway and began his little show. Charts. A schedule for the sale. A list of brokers. The number he wanted to dangle like a treat. He had projected a fast sale, full price. He had penciled in where the proceeds would go. He did not say the word debt. I watched him as if he were a stranger on a stage. I let him play the part. His voice got smoother with his performance. He felt the room slipping, and he tried to charm it back. He talked about efficiency, liquidity, and ease. He did not talk about love. He did not talk about memory. He talked about the house like it was a vending machine. When he finished, I nodded. "You came prepared," I said. "Now I am going to show you what prepared looks like." I turned to Richard. He slid a small speaker onto the table and pressed play. A man's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. Will's. He was on the phone with a bank officer, the call recorded on their end as a matter of policy. He didn't know I would ever hear it. He didn't know that kindness keeps records. The voice said, "We need to accelerate the transfer. The old man won't push back if we frame it as care. He's sentimental. We'll put him somewhere quiet." The cousins went still. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Will lurched forward. "This is illegal," he snapped. Richard shook his head. "Lawful recording by the bank," he said. "Produced under subpoena." He didn't look at Will when he said subpoena. He looked at me. His message was for me. "You are not alone here." I let the last word of that recording hang in the air. Quiet. I have never feared quiet. Quiet is where I live. I looked at Emily and said, "When you were little, you told me quiet meant you felt safe. You crawled into my lap and asked me to listen to your breathing. I did. I took a breath. Now you and your husband are trying to sell my quiet to pay for his noise." She flinched, then turned hard. "This is about practicality," she said. "You're making it into something else. You raised me to be smart. I'm being smart." Richard slid a second page onto the table. It was a printout of public debt records and business filings. Simple columns, dates, balances, names, Will's name, the family name he liked to hide behind. The numbers totaled to something ugly. I didn't read them out loud. I didn't need to. Numbers speak their own language. My cousins leaned in. One of them sucked in his breath. Will's voice broke for the first time. "Those are investments," he said. "Temporary liquidity issues. Nothing you would understand." "Nothing I would understand," I repeated. I let the words become their own sentence. I placed my hand flat on the table. "Let me tell you what I understand. I understand getting up at 4 a.m. to make eggs and coffee for men whose names I never learned, so my daughter could sit in a classroom and never wonder if the lights would be on at home. I understand working Christmas Eve so you could open a car with a bow on it. I understand eating beans so you could eat steak. I understand signing checks while you told people I wasn't good enough to be seen with you. And I understand this house. I know what every board costs. I know where the light falls in July. I know what it meant to your mother to plant those hydrangeas and watch them take root. I understand all of that." I leaned closer. "Don't tell me I don't understand." No one replied. The house replied for us. The clock ticked. The heat clicked on. Somewhere a gull cried. I felt calm, not icy. Calm the way a river is calm when it knows where it's going. We could have ended there, on a slow victory. But I didn't invite them for slow. I invited them to the truth. I reached into my pocket and took out the letter. The envelope was worn, the crease softened by my thumb. I didn't pass it across the table. I didn't need them to hold it to feel it. I looked at it, then looked at them. "Your mother wrote this after she met with your in-laws," I said to Emily. "They pressured her to sign documents that sacrificed our protection. She signed them to keep the peace. She signed them to protect you. She wrote this to make sure I could fix what she knew would come." I paused and let the ache in my chest be heard. She carried that burden alone. She shouldn't have, but she left me what I needed. Emily's face changed. For a moment the armor cracked and I saw my daughter, the girl who once asked if thunder could hurt her. "Dad," she whispered. Just that. One word that reached me without claws. Then she closed it all back up. "Mom loved me," she said. She would want me safe. Safe doesn't mean spoiled, I said. Safe doesn't mean stealing. Safe doesn't mean you sell your father's seat at your wedding for a check. I let the last sentence land. Will shifted. Emily stared at the table. The cousins looked at each other. I set the letter down beside Richard's files and folded my hands again. Before I say anything else, I said, 2 people asked to speak. I turned toward the doorway and nodded. My neighbor stepped in shyly, a paper dish towel folded over her arm like an old habit. She is not a woman who likes to be on display. She spoke softly. I see him every morning, she said. He walks. He brings in my trash cans when I forget. He fixed my gate when the wind broke it. He is steady. He is kind. He is not confused. Then came a man I've known for 40 years, a friend who worked the line with me when we were young and everything smelled like grease and coffee. He looked at me, then at them. He built what you see with his hands, he said. I held the ladder when he put up the first sign. I've seen him tired, but I've never seen him small. Don't mistake quiet for weakness. They didn't stay for applause. There was none. They just nodded to me and left the way they came. I let their words settle like sand into the spaces that had been scooped out of me these past months. I felt fuller, not puffed up, filled in, supported. Will rubbed at his temple like he could erase the afternoon. This is turning into theater, he said. We came to help. We came to do the right thing. John, you're being manipulated by your lawyer. He's filling your head with... Richard's eyes didn't even flicker to Will. He stayed fixed on me. Do you want to proceed? He asked. I nodded. Yes. He pulled a new set of papers from his case and placed them in front of me. He explained, not for Will or for Emily, but for the room and for me. These are notices of permanent transfers and charitable designations prepared under your authority, he said. They confirm what you already directed in Chapter 3, and they finalize the freezes. They close the doors that should have been closed a long time ago. He pointed to the lines that waited for me. Sign where marked. My hand found the pen again. I felt the weight of it. It was not heavy. It was exactly right. The first signature flowed, then the second. My hand was steady, my breath even. Emily made a sound that was part gasp, part wounded animal. Will reached across the table as if he could physically stop the ink. Richard's hand came up, calm, like a traffic cop. Will pulled back, eyes wild. What are you doing? Emily cried. Dad, what are you doing? I didn't answer right away. I finished the last line. I put the pen down. Then I looked at my daughter, the way you look at a child who is too close to the edge of a cliff. I am doing what your mother wanted me to do, I said. I am protecting what we built. I am choosing where it goes. I am choosing who we are. Will's face went red, then gray. He shook his head. You can't give it away, he hissed. You can't just hand a $2.6 million property to strangers. That's insane. Not strangers, I said. Children. Children who don't have what you had. Children who won't sell their fathers for a chair at a table. Emily's voice dropped. You're punishing me, she said. You're humiliating us. In front of family. She looked to the cousins for rescue. None came. She tried again. This is not what Mom would want. I tapped the envelope gently. I don't have to guess, I said. She told me. Richard gathered the signed pages, slipped them into his folder, and clicked it shut. The sound was small. It echoed anyway. He handed me a single letter on his firm's letterhead. This is the notice to the Harrington interests, he said, advising that any attempt to encumber or transfer Mr. Miller's real property or accounts will be met with immediate legal action. We will file it the moment I leave this house, he turned to Will. And may I remind you that attempting to forge another person's signature carries criminal penalties. I have advised my client on possible remedies. Will stood so quickly his chair screeched. He slammed his hand on the table. You think you can scare me with paperwork? He shouted. We have better lawyers. We have more money. We have... Debt, I said. One word. I did not raise my voice. It was enough. He froze. Emily stared at him as if she had never seen him before. What debt? She asked. Her voice was small. Will looked at her and then at me, calculating. Always calculating. Small business issues, he said. Temporary. Richard slid the printouts of the public filings to the center of the table. Emily picked them up. I watched her eyes move left to right, faster, faster, until they stopped. Her hand shook. "You said it was handled," she whispered. "You said your father would cover—" "My father is not the only man with resources," Will snapped. "We had a plan." He turned on me. "You were supposed to be part of it." I let him have those words. I let them lie there and rot in the light. Then I stood. I felt my knees, old but strong. I felt my spine straighten. I felt the floor under my feet, the house supporting me the way it always had. I walked to the mantel and took down a photo of my wife. I held it for a moment, then turned back. "This house is not a plan," I said. "It is a promise." I looked at Emily. "Your mother and I promised each other we would leave the world better than we found it. We promised we would raise a child who understood that people matter more than things. We failed. I failed. I tried to buy love that should have been earned. That ends today." I put the photo back and returned to my chair. I nodded to Richard. He took out one last document. "For the record," he said, "Mr. Miller has directed that the beach house be irrevocably transferred to the foundation associated with Street Mary's Children's Home, to be used for the construction of a new facility and ongoing programs. All proceeds will be restricted to that purpose. The accounts previously targeted for consolidation are now locked. The designations are in place. It is finished." Emily sobbed. Not pretty tears. Raw ones. "You're choosing strangers over your own daughter," she said. "How can you do that?" I breathed in, and when I spoke, my voice was softer than it had been all afternoon. "I'm choosing children over debt," I said. "I'm choosing honesty over the lie that money is love. I'm choosing the man your mother believed I was." Will tried one more time to pull the mask back on. He straightened his jacket. He smoothed his hair. He pasted on that smile that had charmed too many rooms. "This is a mistake," he said. "You're emotional. You're being manipulated. You'll regret this when the attention fades and the bills arrive. I can fix this. Give me the papers, and I'll make it as if today never happened." I looked at him the way you look at a salesman who doesn't know you've already bought elsewhere. "Today happened," I said. "It will keep happening, in memory, in consequence. In the building that rises where my house stands. In every bed where a child sleeps and doesn't dream of being sold." I shook my head. "You can't undo that. Then—" He reached for the folder again, and Richard's hand went flat on it, not forceful. Final. Will's face crumpled for just a second, and in that second I saw the boy inside the man, the boy who had been told he was entitled to everything and taught how to hide when he wasn't. Then the mask snapped back. He pointed at me, a finger like a spear. "You'll die alone," he spat. I let the words strike, and then fall, and then slide away. "No," I said. "I will die as I have lived, with what matters." The cousins stood. One put a hand on my shoulder, firm, fatherly, though he is younger than me. "You did right," he said quietly. My neighbor had been waiting on the porch. She peeked in, worried by the voices. I met her eyes and nodded. She exhaled and disappeared, a little guardian spirit, the kind of person money never notices and never deserves. Emily wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She looked at Will, and I watched the moment something snapped inside her. "You said you had this under control," she said. "You said your family would help. You said Dad would sign. You said—" He laughed, short and hard. "You said you could make him," he countered. "You said he would do anything for you. You said he was weak." Her mouth opened, closed. She shook her head like a swimmer clearing water. For a heartbeat, I thought she might look at me and see me. Then she grabbed her purse, yanked the door open, and stormed into the fading light. Will followed, still throwing words over his shoulder like rocks he hoped would land. The door shut. The house breathed. Richard sat down slowly, as if he were letting his body catch up to a long run. He handed me a glass of water, and waited while I drank. My hands didn't shake. The water tasted clean. I could taste the metal of the pipe, the small mineral edge. It made me think of the first nights in this house, when we slept on a mattress on the floor and ate store-bought pie with plastic forks because our kitchen wasn't ready yet. We were happy then, poor and happy. You can be both. People forget that. I walked to the window and watched Emily and Will cross the yard. They looked smaller than they had on the way in, not because I had grown, because they had shed a layer of pretense and hadn't yet found anything solid beneath it. My chest hurt. Not the sharp kind of pain. The old kind. The kind you get when you lift something heavy and set it down, and your muscles tremble from effort and relief. Richard stood beside me. "You sure?" he asked. He didn't mean the papers. Those were done. He meant the next steps, the headlines, the phone calls. The way people who did not carry this would try to carry it for me with opinions and whispers. I nodded. "I'm sure," I said. He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and left to file what needed filing. I stayed where I was until the sun moved off the table and the room slipped into that soft gray I have always loved. I turned on a lamp. I picked up the photo of my wife again and held it to my chest. "We did it," I said, out loud. "To the air. To the woman who taught me that love is a verb." I could almost hear her laugh. Not the high laugh she used in company. The low one, the private one, the one that meant yes. The phone on the wall buzzed with a call I didn't answer. It stopped. It started again. It stopped. I let it ring through to silence. My neighbor knocked gently, slipped in, and set a covered dish on the counter. "Pot roast," she said. "You'll need to eat." Then she left before I could say thank you. I stood there smiling at a closed door. Kindness can be loud without saying a word. When the house was quiet again, I sat at the table and opened a clean notebook. I wrote the names of the people I wanted to call tomorrow. The director at Street Mary's. The contractor who would bid on the first phase. My accountant who had spent 3 years telling me I should spend more on myself and less on everyone else. I wrote the words keys, closing, and auction, and then crossed out auction. Not an auction, a blessing. I wrote that word instead. It felt right. I wrote it twice. Blessing. Blessing. I have learned that victory is not a trumpet. It is a long exhale. It is the human body releasing what it has carried. It is a father standing in his own kitchen, feeling the floor hold him up. It is a man who has been called small, remembering he is not. They will tell their version. They will say I lost my mind. They will say I was manipulated by a slick lawyer and sentimental neighbors. They will say I threw away wealth. I did not. I redirected it. I put the river back in its bed. I kept the promise that made me who I am. If you have ever been told you are less than the people you feed, I know how that feels. If you have ever given until you were empty, and then asked to give again, I know that sting. If you have ever watched your name be used like a rag to clean up someone else's mess, I know that shame. And if you have ever found a letter that handed you back your spine, I know that miracle too. I stood, washed the few cups we had used, dried them, and put them away. I turned off lights one by one, and let the house settle into itself. I cracked open the window in our bedroom, so I could hear the ocean in the night. I placed the letter back in its box, and set the box on the nightstand, where my wife once kept a jar of hand cream and a book of poems. I slid into bed and looked at the ceiling the way I did the night Emily was born, counting the breath between hope and fear. I fell asleep without a fight. Tomorrow there will be more calls. Tomorrow there will be paperwork and permits and a story that will travel farther than I expect. Tomorrow there will be people who think they understand. Some will, most won't. That is all right. I did not do this for applause. I did it for a girl who once fell asleep in my lap to the sound of her own breathing. I did it for a woman who planted flowers and hid her fear so her daughter could have one more year of peace. I did it for a boy who will learn that a bed can be safe. I did it for the man I promised myself I would be. They thought I was weak. They thought I would fold. They thought a signature could be scared out of me. Today, they saw the cost of underestimating a quiet man. Today, they saw the end of a plan that was never theirs to make. And you, sitting with me now, hearing this, carrying your own small and large betrayals, I know your ache. I know that burn behind the eyes. I know the way you replay conversations in the shower and wish for a sentence you didn't have then. Take this from me. You can choose the sentence now. You can choose the line you will not cross and the promise you will not sell. Does it hurt to be treated like you don't matter? Of course it does. It cuts. It bruises. It lingers. But pain is not the end. Pain is a bridge. You walk it. On the other side is your name. Clean. On the other side is your house, even if it moves, even if it becomes a shelter you will never sleep in, even if it becomes a playground you will never swing on. It is still your house, because it is still your choice. That is wealth no one can steal. I carried the truth today from my pocket to the table and set it down. It was heavier than gold, and it did not sparkle. It did not need to. It did its work. It broke what needed breaking. It held what needed holding. It turned on the light and showed the dust, and then it let us breathe. If you are listening and your chest feels tight because you have been unseen, I see you. If you are listening and you wonder if you are strong enough, you are. If you are listening and you think you have waited too long to draw a line, you haven't. The clock will tick either way. Let it tick for you this time. Feeling overlooked, treated like you're not enough. That's tough, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves recognition, dignity, and a say in their own life, type one word for me now: recognition. Now watch what they do when the one they dismissed refuses to disappear. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The days after that family confrontation passed like the first cool winds of autumn. Something had shifted inside me. Something heavy had finally lifted. I wasn't carrying their betrayal anymore. I wasn't carrying their greed, their disdain, their contempt. I was carrying my own life again. For the first time in years, I felt that the story belonged to me, not to them. I met with Richard one last time in his office. The wood-paneled walls and shelves of law books no longer felt intimidating. They felt like a shield, like protection. Richard handed me the final documents, stamped and signed. "It's official now, John," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "The house is transferred to the charitable trust. No one, not Emily, not Will, not the Harringtons, can touch it anymore." I nodded, slowly exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. My signature on those pages meant closure. It meant that their hands, those greedy, grasping hands, would never touch what my wife and I built. When I walked out of his office, the air felt lighter. The sun hit my shoulders with warmth I hadn't noticed in months. The Cape Cod house, that grand oceanfront dream worth $2.6 million, no longer felt like a battlefield. It wasn't mine to defend anymore. It was now a gift, a foundation stone for something greater. Plans were already underway. The property would be renovated into a new children's home, a place for orphans and kids without safe families. I could almost hear the laughter of children echoing in those walls again, not as ghosts of my own past, but as a promise for their future. Meanwhile, Emily and Will's lives unraveled quickly. Word spread about the hearing, about the lies, about the debts. The Harrington name no longer glittered like gold, it cracked like porcelain. Will's hidden loans, nearly $900,000, came crashing down on him. Creditors circled. His so-called friends vanished. Within months, his business holdings collapsed. Bankruptcy notices piled up. And Emily, my daughter, she was left to face the wreckage. The same people she had flaunted in front of me, the same crowd she had chosen over her own father, now turned their backs. Her phone calls went unanswered. The invitations stopped. She moved out of their mansion and into a small rented apartment. Soon after, she filed for divorce. Will blamed her for his downfall. She blamed him for ruining her life. Their marriage, built on arrogance and greed, crumbled as quickly as it had been celebrated. One morning, I opened my mailbox and found an envelope with Emily's handwriting. My hands paused. I knew before opening it what it would say. Inside was a letter, pages filled with apologies. She wrote about regret, about shame, about how she didn't see what she was doing until it was too late. She begged me to call her, to meet her. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the paper. Part of me, the father in me, wanted to feel relief, wanted to forgive. But then I remembered the years of sacrifice, the words she threw at me like knives, the way she sold my place at her wedding like it was a seat at an auction. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness means choosing not to carry the anger anymore, while also choosing not to invite the poison back into your life. I whispered to myself, I don't need her apology. I don't need her approval. I have my life. And with that, The weight dissolved. I moved into a modest condo near a park. It was nothing like the grand beach house, but it was perfect. 2 bedrooms, a balcony that looked over tall oak trees, and morning light that filled the kitchen with gold. It cost a fraction of the old place, just under $200,000, but it felt more valuable than any mansion. It was mine. It was peaceful. I could hear birds at dawn instead of arguments. I could breathe. I started to rediscover the things I had put away long ago. I planted flowers in pots on my balcony. I joined a small community book club. I found myself sitting with neighbors in the evenings, sharing stories, drinking sweet tea, laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in years. One of them, a retired teacher, brought me a box of sunflower seeds. "Try these, John," she said with a smile. "They'll make your balcony brighter." Little acts of kindness, simple connections, these were the things I had forgotten while chasing Emily's approval. Now I was free to enjoy them again. The day the children's home officially opened, I stood quietly in the courtyard. The walls had been repainted a cheerful yellow, the old wood floors restored, the playground built with swings and slides. 75 children ran and shouted, their laughter filling the air like music. A little boy, no older than 8, tugged at my sleeve. He held my hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you, sir. You gave us a family." My throat closed. My eyes stung. That moment was worth more than all the money in the world. My wife had wanted me to protect our legacy, and I had. But more than that, I had turned it into something greater than us both. Meanwhile, Emily tried again. She left me another voicemail. Her voice cracked as she said, "Dad, I just want to see you. I'm sorry. Please, can we start over?" I sat in silence after hearing it. My answer was in the life around me, in the flowers blooming on my balcony, in the laughter of the children, in the friends I had made who never asked me for a penny. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. My boundary was clear. I wasn't cruel. I simply chose not to return to the fire I had already escaped. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the park in orange, I spoke softly to my wife's photo, the one I kept on the table by my chair. "I don't need them anymore. I have myself. I have you in memory. And I have these children. This is enough." For the first time since she passed, I felt she was smiling back at me. The lessons settled into my bones. For parents, I learned that love must come with boundaries. Giving endlessly without teaching values is not love, it's surrender. For children, I saw the destruction of greed and ingratitude. Emily had everything, but her hunger for more devoured it all. And for all of us, I understood that in this modern world, money and appearances mean nothing without character. Character and truth are the only assets that never lose their worth. One Saturday morning, I walked through the park, carrying a bag of fresh bread rolls for the community center. A small girl with golden curls ran up to me, handed me a wildflower, and skipped away. Just a simple gesture, yet it filled me with warmth. The world still had kindness in it. The world still had good people. I had chosen the right path to step away from betrayal and step toward a wider circle of care. I know now that life is not measured by the size of the house or the numbers in a bank account. Life is measured by peace in your heart, by the connections you make, by the love you give freely. I finally found peace, not in holding tighter, but in letting go. So I leave you with this thought. Betrayal hurts. Being overlooked, being treated like you're not enough, that's painful. But healing comes when you stop begging for their recognition and start recognizing your own worth. I want to hear from you. What lesson do you take from this story? What truth will you carry into your own life? Share it with me. Share it with everyone. Type it in the comments, because I will read every word. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.